Tonight on the Worldview Weekend Hour, Unconventional Warfare. That's the name of a manual put out by the U.S. military, the U.S. Army, to be specific, in 1966. It was rewritten in 2016. And what does it list? Well, page 9 lists 21 steps to insurrection and revolution. My friends, we're in the final 4 steps. No conspiracy theory here, folks. U.S. Army Joint Publication document. 21 steps to revolution. According to them, and if you read the list, we're on the final 4. My guest tonight, historian and author Trevor Loudon. The Worldview Weekend Hour begins right now.
WVW-TV presents the Worldview Weekend Hour with Brannon and Howse. Whether the topic is law, science, government, economics, history, family, social issues, education, or theology, Brannon brings the issues of today into clear focus through the lens of a biblical worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Weekend Hour. My guest tonight, Trevor Loudon, and we're going to show you screenshots of this document, Unconventional Warfare, put out by the United States Army, a joint publication. It was actually written in 1966, rewritten in 2016, and it lists 21 steps to revolution and insurrection. And my friends, we're in the final 4. The final 4 steps of insurrection and revolution. I sent this to a friend of mine this week who is in the United States military. He has hundreds of folks answering to him in his intelligence job, in the intelligence arena. And I sent this PDF to him and I said, is this legitimate? Is this the real deal? He looked at it, called me back. He said, yeah, it's the real deal. It's open source. It's a real document. It's put out by the U.S. Army, a joint publication, as it says. It has some hyperlinks in it. I tried going to those hyperlinks, and for me, they wouldn't work. But for him, they would work. Why? Because he has a security clearance and a card on his computer that allows those files to open up. So it's not only an open source document, it has inside of it links that, well, you have to have a certain clearance to even go to those links. But folks, I vetted this document. It is real. And joining me to talk about it tonight is my friend, Trevor Loudon, author of the book, White House Reds. Trevor, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Look, it's always a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
All right, what do you know about this document before we start looking at it?
Well, as you say, it's a United States Army document. It's drawn on the experience of the U.S. Army in Vietnam and updated with information on what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places. Because the Muslim radicals pretty much draw on the Maoist model of insurrection. And this is what this document is. It's basically how Mao Zedong would run a revolution. And that's the lessons were applied in Nicaragua, in Cuba, in Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. So this is a genuine document written by people with very close experience of insurrections in the field, some of which were defeated and some of which weren't.
Well, actually, as I read through the document, Trevor, it sounds as though this could also be used by our own government to try to bring about insurrection or revolution in bad countries. So, again, some of these ideas are okay if you're trying to set people free from a Marxist regime. The problem is when you have people committed to Marxism and overthrowing America that come up with these ideas to overthrow our government. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, look, it's a manual on how to destabilize a country and take it over. Now, if that's a bad country, well, it can be applied for good. But if it's a good country like the United States or Cuba before the revolution or China before the revolution, it's bad. It's a tool. You know, revolution is a science. These are tools, scientific tools to start a revolution in a country. These are the steps you need to go through to make a successful revolution. Now, that can be used for good or it can be used for evil. In the United States, right now, it's being used for evil.
Absolutely. Let's set the stage tonight. Here's an article, Black Trump supporter gunned down in Milwaukee. as the police investigate that there may be a, quote, political motive behind the attack. He was a black gentleman, would stand outside in front of his business with pro-Trump signs, drive-by shooting, and seems it could be politically motivated. My friends, several weeks ago, we warned on radio and television to be looking out for weather underground tactics to include political assassinations. Was that just a political assassination right there? We also were talking, of course, about potentially conservatives being targeted, conservative talk show hosts, political candidates, elected candidates. Political assassinations we warned about. We warned also about bombings, to be on the lookout for the increase in bombings. Why do we know that? One reason we know that is because we've studied the Weather Underground. Here's the document called Prairie Fire, written by many with the Weather Underground. A political statement, in fact, of the Weather Underground says right here, Prairie Fire, the politics of revolutionary anti-imperialism, written many, many, many years ago. We'll go through this document on radio starting this week after my guest tomorrow. But whether you study Bill Ayers, Weather Underground, who is with the Weather Underground, Eric Mann, who, as Trevor will tell you, has been consulting with the founders of Black Lives Matter, Eric Mann of the Weather Underground, consulting with the leaders of the Black Lives Matter campaign, according to documented sources. Why would we be shocked that 1968 is not being repeated? Political assassinations, bombings, and the like. And all the things that we've been warning you about, assassinating cops. We warned you about that several weeks ago, to be watching for targeted assassinations of police officers. We've seen that, and now we're seeing them use explosives. It's now reported U.S. protests, more riots, and lawlessness in cities across the nation, and they are using explosives just as we warned about several weeks ago. Why? Again, because this is exactly what the Weather Underground did. All you got to read is their own documents on Prairie Fire, on guerrilla warfare, or their most recent document that I think Bill Ayers wrote, we did a show on a few weeks ago called Burn Down the American Plantation. But here's a headline again, Fox News, U.S. protests, more riots and lawlessness in U.S. cities. Here's a headline, Newsmax, our republic faces a test not seen since the Civil War. And my friends, another one, how to prepare for a communist coup, coming from the American thinker. All of this shows us, again, that this insurrection and this revolution that our own U.S. military was warning about in this document is indeed playing out now on our televisions and on news sites. Well, let's go to our first slide tonight. This tonight is the cover of this document, Unconventional Warfare, a pocket guide. It says that the purpose of this document at the bottom is to provide a pocket reference of unconventional warfare, doctrine, concepts, academic inquiry, and suggested supplementary reading for military leaders and planners. Notice it says it is a joint publication, activities conducted to enable a resistance movement or insurgency to coerce, disrupt, or overthrow a government or occupying power by operating through or with an underground, auxiliary, and guerrilla force in a denied area. This is the 21 steps we're going to go through tonight. 21 steps, starting at the bottom, going all the way to the top. I believe we have now completed all of these except the final four. We're in the fourth, the last four stages till you have an insurrection or a revolution. We'll go through each of these tonight. Comments first, Trevor, from you on this so far?
Yeah, well, I think you're right on. And you talked about the Weather Underground. Well, they were Maoists, and they were following this playbook, but they didn't have the strength to carry it through. This was when in the 60s, when America was still pretty conservative, where the kids hadn't been indoctrinated in the schools like they have today. I talked to Carl Davidson a few years ago, a former SDS radical Maoist communist, and I said, Carl, you were there in 68. I interviewed him for my movie, Enemies Within. You were there in 68, mass riots on the streets, bombings, etc. Can you ever see that happening again in America? And he said, yep, it's just around the corner and it's going to be bigger and better. And why? Because he said in those days, it was just us crazy kids. America was conservative and patriotic. Now we've had 40 years to indoctrinate the kids in the colleges in Marxism. The next one is going to be so much bigger and better. And this is exactly what he was talking about. And it was all planned for election year to basically bring down President Trump and usher in a socialist America.
And that was your documentary called what now? Enemies Within? Is that what it was called?
Enemies Within.
Where can they get a copy of that?
Well, people can go to my website, trevorloudon.com, or you can get it on Amazon, but you'll get it a lot quicker through me. So trevorloudon.com, you can order my books and my DVDs there.
And while we're plugging stuff, you might remember, folks, I produced a documentary came out in November 2018, Sabotage, how the Islamist Marxists and their useful idiots are destroying America from within. 6 hours. You can watch 1 hour for free at sabotagethemovie.com. Trevor Loudon is in this documentary, and we're talking about Antifa. And we warn to look out. Antifa will start going to the homes of conservatives to, well, maybe bring bodily harm or death to them, but certainly to intimidate them. After we did this, well, just a few months later, what happened? Antifa apparently showed up at the door of Tucker Carlson. Now he had to move. Now it's reported that they're trying to out where his new home is. Yeah, I know all about that because, as you will see in this documentary, even some of the useful idiots that are mentioned in the subtitle here within evangelicalism tweeted out my home address and going after my family. So many of the useful idiots are within evangelicalism that have helped prepare the way. Folks, they've gone after the power centers of education, media, government, and religion. And now they have many, many so-called churches on their side. Not just the mainline churches. Many of the so-called evangelical churches now want to talk all about white privilege and social justice, just as I warned about in my book, Marxianity, that came out in November 2018, subtitled How the Evangelical Deep State and Their Useful Idiots Are Merging Marxism and Christianity Through Social Justice, White Privilege, Cultural Marxism, Illegal Immigration, Interfaith Dialogue, and more. All footnoted and documented. So as we go through this document, remember tonight, folks, many of your evangelical churches, thanks to the likes of the seeker-sensitive megachurch, people like Joel Osteen and others now marching in Houston with Black Lives Matter, founded by 3 communist women, those who want to promote social justice, white privilege, like Matt Chandler, David Platt, the Gospel Coalition, these folks are helping to carry out the revolution. Because as you'll see in this document, it's very important to penetrate all the power centers. And then finally, what came out in December 2019, Siege. Trevor's in this one as well. My documentary that's 8.5 hours entitled The Clear and Present Dangers Pushing America to the Brink of a Marxist Islamic Revolution, Civil War, World War III, and Globalism. 8.5 hours came out December 2019. In this one, I talk also about Russia and China, what they're doing, and China, Russia, and Iran practicing for war against the United States, including nuclear war, and one of the largest military exercises in world history, Vostok 18, the summer of 2018. I also talk about them pulling down statues and why they must destroy statues of historical figures, particularly those who are conservative figures, anti-communist figures like John Wayne. That's in this film that came out December 2019. 8.5 hours. You'll find the documentaries to order at siegethemovie.com. This one you can find at siegethemovie.com. This one at sabotagethemovie.com. And obviously the book Marxianity at marxianity.com. And then, of course, Trevor Loudon's excellent book, including his documentary, including his book that came out a few months ago, White House Reds, which has a lot of history in it about those running for president. And in fact, of course, a lot of them are not running now, but they're still in power. They're in political places. They might be in a Biden administration, but many of them are connected back to communist organizations. And his book is called White House Reds. All right, let's go to the next screenshot as we break down this pyramid put out by the government. The first one, Trevor, is dissatisfaction with political, economic, social, administrative, and or other conditions, national aspiration, or desire for ideological and other changes. So in other words, create dissatisfaction with political, economic, and social administration and conditions. Well, don't you think that's happened as we push social justice and how America is an evil, horrible place and you disparage our economic system and so much else? This has been going on for a long time and in our textbooks, particularly for decades, correct?
Yeah, this is a long-term process. What we're seeing now has been in train for over 40 years. We're just starting. It's like a wave, that you're like a surfer riding a wave. Takes a long time for the wave to build up, but now the wave is coming to its crest. And will it recede or will it go over and take us down with it? That remains to be seen.
All right, the next one here, as we go back to the slide, create a creation of atmosphere of wider discontent through propaganda, lies, and political and psychological effort, discrediting government, police, and military authorities. Now, isn't that interesting? We start out with propaganda. What's another word for propaganda, folks? Brainwashing. I'm working on the documentary now, Brainwashed America, that will be out in, probably by November, December 2020. They give the historical context for how the communists have brainwashed the people of China with the 1949 Communist Revolution in China, as well as how they brainwashed American POWs in the Korean War. I'll show you 12 steps for brainwashing that I've uncovered thus far, and I believe all 12 were used then and are being used now. But propaganda, that's brainwashing. Lies, political and psychological effort. What we're talking about here is psychological warfare, psychological operations, information operations. We've done a lot of information warfare. We've done a lot of programs on that over the last several months, have we not, folks, in the last year? And then discrediting government, police. Is any of that going on? What is Black Lives Matter and all this really about? Defunding the police. All about discrediting the police, breaking down the rule of law, right? And the military authorities, discrediting the military. This is all happening, but we're only on the second stage of 21, Trevor.
Yeah, well, we can see it looking back, can't we? We sort of saw these things at the time, and, the police were getting, constant harps of police brutality. The government is intruding on all that. The government is out of control. The government is oppressing people. America's a white racist nation. The founding fathers are all slaveholders. Most young American kids now have no idea how this country was founded. They think it was founded by white slave owners ripping off the third world. That's how they think America was founded. And that's a psychological operation to destroy one's faith and confidence and patriotism in one's own country.
The next one, and the next slide, assassination, forming favorable public opinion, advocating for national cause, creation of distrust of established institutions. So assassinations, these would be political assassinations. Have we seen police assassinated? Yeah, just sitting in their squad cars and someone walks up and shoots them in the head. Or they show up at a house and they're shot and killed right on the front doorstep. That happened just a few weeks ago. We've had a lot of police assassinations. Now we may start seeing political assassinations. Forming favorable public opinion, advocating national cause, creation of distrust of established institutions. Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School, what did he say? He was quoting Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist. He talked about the what? The long march through the institutions. They studied that Italian communist Gramsci at the Frankfurt School, the cultural Marxist out of Germany, came to America in 1933. Their Marxist Institute, again, came to America at the invitation of John Dewey, the father of modern education. But Herbert Marcuse, who coined the phrase "make love, not war," said that it was a new kind of revolution, a diffused and dispersed disintegration of the system. To do that, they must attack every institution, the family, church, government, police, military, schools, you name it, everything, every institution. And that's the third step of 21 toward insurrection and revolution. Trevor?
Well, now they're even in sport, aren't they? You'd think that football and baseball and basketball would have been free, but now you've got, football players taking the knee, kowtowing to Black Lives Matter. Every institution must be discredited and brought down. Everything that Americans hold dear, everything they look up to and respect, must be smeared and dragged through the mud. And that demoralizes a society, which is where most people are today.
You used a key word there, demoralize. I remember Yuri Bezmenov, the former KGB officer who I played the clips of in Siege at siegethemovie.com. Former KGB officer Yuri Bezmenov gave us an interview and speeches in 1984 talking about the Soviet Union's espionage in America, and that the James Bond movies don't portray it right, that most of it is about propaganda, lies, disinformation, warfare, psychological warfare. And he laid out these stages: demoralize, destabilize, chaos, and then the new norm. And you used that phrase, demoralize. He talked about that. You demoralize, take away absolute truth, the Ten Commandments, prayer, anything you can. You demoralize. Moral relativism, situational ethics, outcome-based education, whatever you want to call it. Demoralize, destabilize. The demoralization creates the destabilization, creates the chaos, which is what we're in today. You've pumped these kids head full that America is a racist, horrible nation. The source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism. And now you have chaos. And then after the chaos, the system eventually collapses and people surrender. They negotiate some kind of surrender, and you have the new norm. Would you comment?
That's exactly what's happening. The new norm will be socialism. They need to drag us so far down into the mud and disconcert people so much they'll just cry out for peace and stability. So the socialists come and say, we will give you peace, we will give you stability, just sign up to socialism, surrender your freedom, surrender your wealth, and you will have peace. Well, the only peace to a communist is lack of opposition to communism. That's when you have peace. And so the idea is to drag us into so much instability, we will welcome the socialists. We will welcome them into this country and willingly adopt their system. And if a few of us object, well, we'll just be taken away to camps to be re-educated or shot.
And, people who think that's crazy talk, I interviewed Larry Grothwall, who as a young man in Ohio penetrated some of these groups on the college campuses there, working for the police. It got so serious what he was doing that he was put undercover by the FBI to penetrate the Weather Underground, and he became, quote, friends, end quote, if you will, as a guy undercover for the FBI with Bernardine Dorn, Bill Ayers, these characters. He gave an interview many years ago. He's a very young man in the interview. You'll find it out on the internet, talking about the fact that these people with advanced degrees, like Bill Ayers, their advanced degrees, were talking about the need to push Americans off to re-education camps, and of those that they couldn't re-educate, they would have to exterminate, and they were trying to figure out what to do with all the bodies. I interviewed him. He's passed away now. I interviewed him. Did you ever have the chance to interview him? And if not, can you talk about Larry Grothwall?
Yeah, I met him several times.
Tell us about
that.
The
figure he gave, the figure they gave was about they would have to eliminate about 25 million people in America. And this was in the 70s. The equivalent figure would probably be about 33 million today. But that's nothing to a communist, What did Stalin say? One death is a tragedy. Millions of deaths are a statistic.
The next step in our slide presentation here, increased agitation. Again, this is coming from the U.S. Army Joint Publication, updated in 2016. I believe it was originally written in 1966 and then updated in 2016. 21 Steps to Revolution. We're in the final four that you'll see as we climb this ladder. The next one on the slide, increased agitation, unrest and disaffection, infiltration of administration, police and military and national organizations, and slowdowns and strikes. Now, we could spend all night on this one, but let's break it down. Increased agitation. What did Saul Alinsky say? Agitate to the point of conflict. That the job of the community organizer was to create dissatisfaction and to agitate to the point of conflict. Remember in the 1950s, as I document in my documentary Siege at siegethemovie.com, former communists like Manning Johnson and others talked about the fact that what they hoped to have happen in America was guerrilla warfare on the streets of America. Well, folks, we're now seeing guerrilla warfare, are we not? They even had guerrilla warfare manuals, how these terror cells could operate independently and how they could do urban warfare, get into the inner cities and be involved in shootouts with the police and bombings. And of course, that is what the community organizers were laying down first, was that dissatisfaction. And again, the dissatisfaction leads to agitation. Agitate to the point of conflict. So the slide says increased agitation, unrest, and disaffection. So taking away the affection for America, patriotism, our way of life, our institutions. Infiltration of administration. That could be all kinds of administration, local, state, federal level. Do we have that today? By the way, don't forget the blueprint for the communists became the 1948 revolution in Czechoslovakia, where they penetrated the administration of the government to the point they could take over without firing a shot. So you put your insurrection folks and your agitators, your revolutionaries inside the government at the local, state, and federal level. So they're there to just take over. But you also infiltrate the police. Many within law enforcement administration today are just political pawns. We see that in the FBI, don't we? Donald Trump called the FBI at the 7th floor not too long ago, what? Dirty, filthy cops. You have Comey giving the FBI Director's Award to a jihadi. Mueller giving the FBI Director's Award to a jihadi. I mean, we can go on and on about the dirty, filthy cops at the FBI, but sadly, this goes on in our police departments, folks. We're not condemning all police, but this is a tactic. They infiltrate the police departments and the administration who go along with the politicians who have gotten there, like the politicians in Minneapolis. The mayor of Frey of Minneapolis, a white lawyer, community organizer like Barack Obama. And then you have the governor of Minnesota that we've talked about with Trevor Loudon, put through the Wellstone School, the Marxist Wellstone School. He's the governor now. You have the Attorney General in Minnesota, Keith Ellison, a pro-Islamist, promoting Antifa, by the way, as well. So you put these people into power, and the revolution is going to be very successful when they're in power, and their pressure from above, being them, and their pressure from below. So again, let's go back to this slide. This is the fourth step. Increased agitation, unrest, disaffection, infiltration of administration, police, and military. How much of the military is standing with Trump? Are some of them actually coming against Trump, the commander-in-chief? And national organizations and slowdowns and strikes. Well, you start striking with your garbage and it piles up at the street. That's a powerful way to strike. How about other strikes? How about close all your schools down in the fall of 2020? Don't open your schools. Even though the American Pediatrics Association is saying the kids need to go back to school. They don't really have to worry about this virus. Get the kids back in school. But what are we finding out this week, folks? Breaking all around the country. They're not going back to school. Or they're only going to go back 2 days a week, or what it might be in your town. Parents are coming unglued. Why? Most of them are two-income families. They all have to get up and go to work in the morning, mom and dad. Who's going to watch the children? Who's going to take care of the kids if there's no school? Now you basically have the liberal teachers union, like the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, and others, in bed with the Marxist. That's documented proof since my books, since 1993 and 95, about the NEA and their positions on the UN and global governance, etc. Well, now these groups are agitating for not opening schools. Isn't this really, Trevor Loudon, a form of strike, which will really create a problem for many parents? And of course, at the end of the day, who's going to get the blame for all this? Well, the teachers unions and the media and etc. will all make sure it lands in the lap of Donald Trump that the communist coronavirus broke out here in America. But I guess my question is this: is what we're seeing by these teachers unions another form of a strike, just not called that?
Yeah, look, exactly it is. And you've got, Maoist groups in Minnesota, for instance, and Wisconsin attacking businesses who wanted to open up. They want to keep this shut down as long as they can, which wrecks the economy, wrecks Trump's chances of re-election, increases dissatisfaction, increases poverty, increases just stress levels, and demoralizes people. This is the way to get a revolution. And they're using the coronavirus, which came from China, was deliberately spread by China, who are the people and it's China who's behind these riots in this country. So this is all part and parcel of destabilizing and demoralizing this country to the point of revolution.
The next one on our PowerPoint slide, infiltration of foreign agents and agitators, and foreign propaganda material, money, weapons, and equipment. Now, again, we could spend all night on this one. Infiltration of foreign agents and agitators. Let's just stop there and break it down as we go. Trevor, Maoist front groups, foreign agents involved in agitation on our streets?
Yeah, right now there's already been Venezuelans have been caught agitating here. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which started the riots in Minneapolis, has sent 5 delegations to Venezuela in the last year. But then you've also got Russia Today, RT, you've got Al Jazeera, you've got all these propaganda stations pumping out disinformation and propaganda 24/7. You've got 25,000 Chinese spies working in this country. You've got Iranian agents here working with politicians. You've got massive foreign infiltration of this country.
We deal with it, by the way, some in the movie Siege with former CIA operations officer Claire Lopez and the Iranian terror cells already here in the U.S. Iranian terror cells already here in the U.S. This has been proven by federal trials, by the way. We deal with it in Siege the Movie at siegethemovie.com. So we have infiltration, I'm back to the slide, of foreign agents and agitators, and foreign propaganda material. Well, you just mentioned some of the foreign propaganda material being some of these TV shows and whatnot. Look at this next one. Money, weapons, and equipment. Recently, our federal government and some of our border guys were able to confiscate a shipment that was reportedly coming in from China with gun parts, including silencers. You think any of that was meant for their Maoist Chinese communist street agitators? Silencers and semi-automatic weapons, etc., etc. You think any of that was meant for them, Trevor?
Absolutely. You know, Gordon Chang was on, a very, very good commentator, was on TV the other night talking about this. The Chinese, that's why Trump closed down the Chinese consulate in Houston, because they have been materially aiding some of the radical elements on the streets in this country. You know, plus you have weapons being shipped over the border from Cuba and other countries. So yeah, the Chinese were caught in the 90s shipping automatic weapons to Los Angeles street gangs. So this has been going on for a long time. There's probably weapons caches all over this country just waiting to be dug up.
Not to mention the Islamic groups that have probably stashed weapons, and maybe even some of these mosques, as they found out a few years ago. They were going around closing down mosques in France, according to many public reports you can find, and they were going in there finding military-grade weaponry in those mosques over in France. So those folks might be involved as well in America, which is part of that red-green axis, correct?
Yeah, the Muslims and the Marxists have been working together for many years. They might not like each other that much, but they both hate America.
All right, let's go back to our slide. Recruitment of like-minded individuals and others, indoctrination and use of these for organized purposes. So again, recruitment of like-minded individuals. So that'd be recruit the Islamist to join you. And of course, we know we have, as we proved in the documentary Sabotage at sabotagetothemovie.com, we show one of the Islamic leaders openly stating from the platform, Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign. We have another Islamic person, this one a lady with her hijab, saying, we are the ones that staged a revolution in the Middle East, referring to the Arab Spring. Why can't we stage that kind of revolution here in America? So the Marxists have reached out to the Islamists, like-minded people, to join them, as well as individuals and others. And of course, that means they can also reach out to folks inside the media, religious group, people inside the deep state, the government, and indoctrination and use of these for organizational purposes. So again, that's pretty self-explanatory. All right, let's go to the next slide. This one here is penetration into professional, social, and political organizations and into all parts of society. Penetration into professional, social, and political organizations and into all parts of society. Of course, this was written supposedly in 1966, and then rewritten in 2016. correct, Trevor, this document?
Yep.
And if that's
you see, yeah.
If that's the case, then Gus Hall, the Communist Party USA leader who ran for president several times in the 1970s and 80s, he's the one that said we're going to penetrate the Democrat Party. And between the Democrat Party and the Communist and what he called the political independents, those they could add to their three-legged stool, so people that were part of the anti-nuke group, the radical environmentalist, whatever it might be, animal rights people, those political independents, they could use whatever cause they were for to bring them to their camp, and they would have the three-legged stool of the Democrat Party, the Communist, and the political independents. And so Gus Hall was talking about that back years and years ago, and of course here it is. Penetration into professional, social, and political organizations and into all parts of society. Comment, please.
Yeah, well, National Lawyers Guild has penetrated the legal profession. They're in the medical profession, which is why many of the doctors have bought into this shutdown thing. The Democratic Party is now completely controlled by Marxists. That was the point of my book, White House Reds. 10 of the Democrats running for president were Marxists, including the so-called moderates like Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg, let alone the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens and the other radicals. So the churches are heavily penetrated. The labor unions are communist controlled. Most of the universities are Marxist controlled. You name your Hollywood is completely penetrated. Name me a major power center in America that isn't now run by Marxists. I don't think of any. Even most of the boardrooms, the big publicly traded companies in this country now heavily infiltrated by Marxists.
And they're promoting Black Lives Matter, and they're giving money to it and funding it. And the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant association denomination in America last year at their national conference, passed Resolution 9 affirming cultural Marxism, which is critical race theory, also known as cultural Marxism. So they're even penetrating our once conservative Protestant denominations and associations. So again, go back to the slide, penetration into professional and social and political organizations and into all parts of society. The next one, spreading subversive organizations into all sectors of life in a country or region. So subversive organizations. You mean like Black Lives Matter, Trevor?
Yeah, like Black Lives Matter, like the Environmental Defense Fund, the Fight for 15 campaign, the LGBTQ movement. I could name the Women's March. I could name another dozen just off the top of my head. They're all over.
How about the AND campaign that Tom Littleton and
the AND campaign, run basically out of the Gospel Coalition, is Marxist. The Gospel Coalition, it sounds good, doesn't it? You think it's an organization you'd like to look up to and respect. It's a Marxist-oriented organization, which is doing huge damage to American Christianity.
And this is why I had to write the book, Marxianity, 300 pages, footnoted, because, folks, he's right. And the AND campaign is run by two Barack Obama operatives, and they've penetrated right into the heart of what is supposed to be mainstream conservative evangelicalism, guys that are defending the inerrancy of the Bible. And, some of your biggest Bible teachers are running around with these guys, sharing the platform with them. They're all running together. It's a rat's nest in a wood pile. But, hey, we don't want to talk about social justice. You're my friends. I don't want to be an island, as one Bible teacher said. I don't want to talk about this anymore. You've been given great spots in the kingdom of God. I don't want to be an island. You're my friends. And now that guy who said social justice is one of the greatest threats to the evangelical church reportedly has now come out and said, hey, it's time for us to get past social justice and quit arguing. So again, we got a real problem on our hands, friends. That's why, of course, I wrote the book Marxianity at marxianity.com, and Trevor Loudon writes the books he does, produces the documentaries he does, available at trevorloudon.com, trevorloudon.com. So again, penetration into professional, social, and political organizations into all parts of society. And then we go into spreading subversive organizations into all sectors of life in the country region. All right, here we go. Next one. Establishment of formalized resistance elements. Establishment of formalized resistance elements. Appeal to extraterritorial support infrastructure. Now that sounds kind of complicated. What does that mean, Trevor?
That means the Native Americans now working with the Turks. It means the call for the Native Americans, the recent Supreme Court decision where a whole bunch of America is going to be given back to the Native Americans so they can expand their countries within a country. It means Puerto Rican independence. It means Hawaiian independence. It means the idea of Aztlan, where the southern states will be, southwestern states will be returned to Mexico. It's all happening now,
So you're talking about things like La Raza, the race?
Yeah, La Raza is a big part of this.
And the race is that all the gringos are to get out. The gringos need to get out.
And obviously, and Black Lives Matter too, obviously, because they're essentially a black separatist Marxist organization. They don't want to share the country. They want to take over the country.
All right, the next one, expansion of and coordination among resistance networks.
Well, you see a huge tie-up between Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Communist Party, Democratic Socialists of America, the labor unions, the environmental groups, all working together and all connected to foreign elements, including in Palestine, Cuba, China, and other countries.
Okay, the next one on our slide, intensification of propaganda. So that's the intensification of lies, brainwashing, information operation, political warfare. Increase in disaffection, so get again people to hate the institutions of America. Celebrating the 4th of July is now a racism. Standing for the flag and the national anthems, racism. So increase or intensification of propaganda, increase in disaffection, psychological preparation for revolt. So get people to be ready for the revolt. Get them to be revved up and ready so that when it happens, they've all been mentally prepared that this is justifiable, correct?
Yep, look, there's big elements in this country right now who are getting ready for revolution and ready to revolt. They see it as just around the corner, and they are ready for it.
And then the next one on our slide, overt and covert. Obviously, covert means secret. So out in the open and then covert pressure against governments, strikes, riots, and disorders. And again, we're seeing that overt and then the covert. And the covert stuff is what most of the Americans don't know about, which is why it's so important we do what we do, Trevor, because we're showing that this covert is the Maoist groups. It is the George Soros types. It is these globalists.
Yeah. Yeah, look, 120 cities erupt into riots in 2 days, but this was just spontaneous, right? This was completely planned. It was going to happen in election year. It's been organized for 4 or 5 years. It was all ready to go. And George Floyd was just the spark. But had it not been George Floyd, it would have been Fred Smith in Kentucky the next week, or Joe Jones in California the week after. They were just waiting for the spark and ready to go. Was completely coordinated by these secret groups of pro-Chinese communists.
All right, so let's go to the next one. Sabotage and terror to demonstrate weakness of government. Sabotage and terror to demonstrate weakness of government. Well, don't we see that now today? Don't the governments look awfully weak? They couldn't stop the burning and looting and rioting in all of these American cities. And now Trump is trying to get some of the military, and you got the Secretary of Defense coming out against him. You got some generals coming out against him, current and past. And the whole thing makes Trump look weak, makes the government look weak, makes the police look weak, and it makes the anarchists and everybody else look justified in what they're doing, particularly when you have mayors like Mayor Frey of Minneapolis or the governor of Minnesota saying, hey, we've heard your concerns, the change is coming. The end justifies the means. In other words, your burning and looting and rioting is going to get you what you want. Again, pressure from above, pressure from below. But it all is a sabotage and terror to demonstrate weakness of government.
See, if people thought the government was strong, would they be flooding gun shops right now and emptying the shelves of gun shops? Suburban mothers who've never fired a gun in their life are buying guns now. Why? Because they perceive the government as weak.
Well, and the reality is people are scared. And look at our next one, on the next slide. Increased underground activities to demonstrate strength of revolutionary organizations. Increased underground activities to demonstrate strength of revolutionary organization. So why are people scared? Because they see the government is weak, the revolutionaries are strong, and you could get pulled out of your car and beat to a tar for wearing the wrong hat, having the wrong bumper sticker, wearing the wrong t-shirt, saying, well, all lives matter. And you might find yourself having the living stuffing beat out of you. And the government is nowhere to be found. And so, again, the revolutionaries are looking strong. They're intimidating people. They're scared. And the government's looking weak. And so what are people going to do? They're going to shut their mouth. They're going to be quiet. And so you end up with the silent or muzzled majority. The majority don't agree with it, but now many of them are scared. That's why I don't believe a lot of the polls. Because you think they're going to tell a pollster they're for Trump? They've been shamed and bullied and called a racist and all kinds of things. So they're going to tell the pollster, I'm not voting for Trump. I don't believe these polls for a minute. Because they're all scared. What say you, Trevor?
Yep, exactly. But this is, Lenin took over the Soviet Union, Russia, with 2,000 Bolsheviks, a country of 160 million people at the time. Castro took over Cuba with an army that was 87 members strong. So look, these people don't have big numbers, but they're organized and they have their friends inside the government to help them out. and to refuse to obey instructions from the federal authorities. So you've got a massive infiltration of the system, which is helping these revolutionaries get power way out of proportion to their numbers. And as the people don't trust the government to protect them, they shut their mouths and go along. This is classic revolution. This is how it happened in China and Cuba and every other place that revolutions have occurred.
This next one should make you really catch your breath. Look at the slide. Intense sapping of morale of government, administration, police, and military. Let me read that again. Intense sapping of morale of government, administration, police, and military. What do you think the morale of the police is? Well, we know. They're putting in their retirement papers all over the country. They're walking off the job. Would you want to do that job for that pay? Would you want to do that job when your life is at risk for just sitting in your squad car, eating a turkey sandwich on your break, and someone comes up and puts a bullet in your head? It's happening all over the country. It has for the last few years. Or you show up and you've been ambushed, thought you're going to, maybe this kind of domestic call or that kind of call, and you end up being shot. It was a setup. And then you don't have the mayor standing behind you. The mayors of the cities are talking about how the Black Lives Matter and these folks are all a righteous movement and how bad the cops are. Your own police administration has been so politicized, many of them won't stand with you. Then when you actually have to defend yourself and save your own life or that of your colleague, you end up being arrested and put on trial, losing your life and your anonymity, and your life is ruined. It doesn't matter what happens. I mean, it does matter to the individual that you're found not guilty, but their life is ruined. So again, the morale is not there. And so many of them are walking off the job. Many of them want to get out of the military. Many elected officials are leaving. They're going to retire and walk off. I mean, again, let's look at it. Intense sapping of morale of government, administration, police, and military. Trevor?
Well, that we see that all around, don't we? See, the thing is, because you're laying it out like this, Brannon, people can connect the dots. We see all of these things around us, but most people don't understand it's a process. It's like baking a cake. All the ingredients have to be done in the right way and the right amount to get the desired result. This is our recipe. And if you know the recipe, you can predict what's going to come next.
All right, let's look at the next slide. Notice this is in blue. Negotiations with government representatives. Negotiations with government representatives. This is in blue. And why is this in blue? It's in blue because look at what it says there in the slide. Look at the slide. Public component activities. So the blue is in the public component activities. The red is armed component activities. And the black is underground. So we've had a lot of black. So watch this now. Let's go back down here to the slide. Negotiations with government representatives. Okay? You want to comment? What does that mean, Trevor?
Well, that means basically you get to a point where city governments, and this has not happened on a federal government right now, but you can guarantee if the Democrats are in power, it would be. The city governments are negotiating with these groups. Like in Washington and Seattle, they negotiated with the people who set up that encampment. This has happened in several states around the country. And so this is the beginnings of this. We will see this carry on to higher and higher level if it's not stopped. And I just got to emphasize, people might think I'm talking all doom and gloom here. This can be turned around. This absolutely can be turned around, especially when you know the recipe. But people have got to wake up and understand this is happening, or it will not be turned around.
That's why, again, I know it sounds self-serving, Trevor, but this is why what we're doing is so important. This is why this network, WVW Broadcast Network, that interviews you and works with Tom Littleton and Sharam and Claire Lopez and John Guandolo and Usama Dakdok. We go down the list of all the shows we produce and what we do, and our Roku channel and our app and our text alert list and our new $100,000 website we had to rebuild to make stronger security and code for being hacked. All of this is, and again, I know it sounds self-serving, but if we weren't here doing this, how many groups do you know doing this, Trevor? How many groups do you know that since 2006 have put in $3 to $4 million in total investment? $3 to $4 million in total investment to build the infrastructure and the network to be able to put out this kind of information. That's why what we're doing is so important, because if we have any hope of victory, we have to know the plans. If you don't know the plans of the enemy and who the enemy is, you will lose, correct?
Absolutely. It goes back to Confucius. Sun Tzu, if you know yourself and you know the enemy, you need not fear 1,000 battles. And that's what they know us, but we don't know them enough. They've been studying us for a long time, identifying our weaknesses, identifying our strengths, working out how to take us down. And we're only dimly aware of what they're doing. Well, you're putting an illumination, shining a torch on these cockroaches. And this is the only way we're going to beat them, getting to know who they are and how to counter them.
Do you know any other national radio show or TV show that's gone through this document?
No, I don't think so. I can't really imagine it coming up on Fox News, can you?
No. All right, this next one is kind of scary. Look at this slide. Shadow governance activities. So here's the U.S. military joint publication warning in their document, again, which is called Unconventional Warfare, shadow governance activities. We'd call that the deep state, would we not, Trevor?
Well, we'd call it that, and we'd call it the government of California, which is almost in secession from the United States right now. It's basically a rebellion. The Maoists have taken over Jackson, Mississippi, largely have taken over Durham, North Carolina, and the city council of both of those cities, and also getting involved in, they've already got places like Berkeley and Oakland and pretty much most of California now. Minneapolis has been turned into a new Mogadishu. These are centers of power independent from the federal government. And so they are used to consolidate revolution and then spread it further. This is classic Maoism. This is how Mao took over China. You capture certain areas, you consolidate your power in there, you spread those areas until you've got the country basically dotted with areas you control. And that's underway now.
And notice, folks, we moved from overt, from clandestine to overt. Remember, the black is underground activities, the blue is public component activities, and the red is armed. So now we're moving into the red. What does the next slide say? Minor military and paramilitary actions. We're going to have to move fast, Trevor. Minor military and paramilitary actions. Isn't that what we got going on now as President Trump is trying to send in military groups into these cities? You got minor military activities in these cities. So here is where we're at right now. We're going through 21 steps, and this is the last 4. We're about to see how close we are to total insurrection and revolution with minor military activities in our cities, correct?
We're seeing militias, left-wing militias springing up, the John Brown gun clubs. We saw black militants marching in Stone Mountain in Georgia the other day. We know there's a lot of this activity going on, and they are preparing to challenge federal troops in the cities where these troops are being sent, or these officers are being sent. I think Trump's underestimating what he will need to do to quell this.
Absolutely. And again, don't forget, back in the 1950s, as I document in my documentary Siege, the former communists testified before Congress. They wanted guerrilla warfare to break out in American cities, and that's what they're preparing for, folks. All right, look at the slide. The next one is large-scale military and paramilitary actions. So now our military, our National Guard, and then these groups, these black militant groups, whose names we can't say on television. They include the F word in their name of their military, so-called military, paramilitary organizations, do they not?
Yeah, they do. And look, recently several imams around the country were calling on Muslims to resist unjust government, unjust rulers. That was the same phraseology they used to spark the Arab Spring, where they turned over the Egyptian government, the Libyan government, the Tunisian government. So you've got, these are the calls that come down every Friday in the mosques, and they have been talking for American Muslims to rise against unjust rulers. Well, who's that? That's President Trump. That's what they're talking about here. And this is the same wording they used for the revolutions in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and that are still creating chaos in the Middle East.
All right, here's the last two. International strategic communications. What is that, Trevor?
Well, that means, groups in this country start reaching out to the United Nations. Which they're already doing. The Native American groups are already doing this. They're reaching out to Cuba. They're reaching out to China for help. And you can imagine, Chinese or UN peacekeepers coming onto American soil, to restore order, like they did in the Congo to establish communism in the Congo many years ago. So we're not there yet, but we're seeing inklings of that.
Those kind of documents have already been written that allow the UN troops to go into countries that are unraveling, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, here's the final one. Negotiated settlement. So the insurrection, the revolution successful, and now your elected officials who are on the wrong side start to negotiate the surrender.
Yeah, which is what they did in South Africa, what they did in Rhodesia to allow the communists to take over, what they did in Nicaragua, many other countries. So basically, the country is so beaten down, there's been so much war and so much chaos, the government surrenders and says, okay, Black Lives Matter, you're running the place now. That's it, we surrender. And that's the final stage. And once you get there, you never come back from that.
And folks, we're in the final 4 steps of the 21, according to the U.S. military document. Trevor, again, we're not trying to preach doom and gloom, as you said. We're trying to show the plans of the enemy because, as you said, the art of war, you must know your enemy. And if you don't know your enemy, you don't name them, and you don't know their tactics, you can't refute them. As you're going to see in my documentary on brainwashing and propaganda, we heard the word propaganda a lot, didn't we? Propaganda or brainwashing, one of the ways to refute that is with the truth. So if we want to win, we have to present the truth. This is really an information operation, a brainwashing operation, if you will. And the way you refute the brainwashing and propaganda is with the truth. And that's what this outlet's all about. That's what Trevor's been doing with his documentaries, his books. You'll find his documentaries and books at trevorloudon.com. trevorloudon.com. Closing comment, Trevor?
Look, the first thing we got to understand is if we don't win the next election, this revolution rolls on. If President Trump wins the next election, it'll still roll on, but much, much slower. We have to actually stand up for America and push this back. If we push this back now, we can win this. We can win it handsomely. But if we're intimidated, we've only got ourselves to blame if we lose for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Trevor, for being with us tonight.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Very sobering subject, Brannon, but the truth shall set us free, shall it not?
Absolutely. My friends, that's my friend Trevor Loudon. And again, if you appreciate what we're doing, it's vital we hear from you with a tax-deductible contribution at WVW-Foundation.com, WVW-Foundation.com. You can also use our mailing address or our phone number. You'll find that all at WVW-Foundation.com. Also, if you want to join our VIP club, where we've archived thousands of radio shows, over 1,000 TV shows. I've lost track. We're well over 1,000 TV shows, ebooks, audiobooks, transcripts, a lot more. If you join our VIP club at the 1-year, 2-year, or 3-year rate at WVW-TV.com/subscription, WVW-TV.com/subscription, I'll send you my book, Marxianity and Sabotage, as a gift for saying thank you for joining. If you haven't received yours yet, hold on, be patient. We're doing our best to keep up and catch up. We've also been flooded with freeze-dried food orders the last few weeks. And that's interesting because, again, there's reports coming out even from publications like Forbes magazine that China has the first strike capability when it comes to an EMP and putting down our power grid. People are waking up. They used to want to mock us on what we were promoting and talking about. Then their grocery store started going bare with paper towels, toilet paper, meat, and Campbell's soup. And now the freeze-dried food that we've been offering for years is flooding out the door. We just got 2 pallets in the other day. We're doing our best to not only send you the free movie Sabotage and Marxianity if you signed up for the Situation Room at WVW-TV.com/subscription, but we're doing our best to keep those freeze-dried food orders filled with more going out each and every day. We're only about 3 or 4 weeks out now in your time from your placing your order to deliveries, now about 4 weeks, down from 8+ weeks down to 4 weeks. So again, all that detail can be found at WVW-TV.com, WVW-TV.com. Folks, thanks again for joining us, for telling your friends about this very important program and disseminating it out there for all to watch and watch again. Till next time, I'm Brannon Howse. Thanks for watching. Take care.